all so much for being here. It's been such a wonderful weekend to be in this magical space. And we always like to open our events, our readings with a brief moment for all of us just to be in our bodies and feel the truth of our bodies. So I'm just going to have us take a breath in this short life, out, that lasts only an hour. In, how much, how little is within our power.
For most of us, Emily Dickinson isn't the first poet who comes to mind when we think of poetry of the body. Sappho, H.D., Rich, Clifton, Olds, sure. But Dickinson? And yet, here is a poet who felt her life with both her hands. Here is a poet whose white cotton dress, with its mother of pearl buttons, burns so mightily on the backs of her eyes, our eyes. The body once present inside that dress, inside the room that some of us had the pleasure of walking through just mere hours ago. And within that body, her incredible brain, wider than the sky. Dickinson seems, in fact, to be writing both from and towards the deep interior of the body. In her poems, we find veins and arteries, muscles, cells, nerves, pounds upon pounds, lungs, bones, and brains galore. She honors and plumbs her subjectivity. While life may be over there, over here, we nobodies, we women, we disabled, we non-binary, we caretakers, we seeking abortions, we grieving our mothers, our children, ourselves, we queer and lonely, we sick, we just tired, we ecstatic, we with our jiffy popping hearts and our hair the color of pills and filled mice, we nobodies over here, far from the admiring bog, have perhaps the deepest knowledge of what it means to be in bodies and have the courage to brave those very bodies and to create the poems that rise from that bravery. Before I got my eye put out, Dickinson writes, I liked as well to see. This anthology, our anthology that we love and that we feel so grateful to share with all of you, of 116 poets braving their bodies, is evidence of Dickinson's legacy of that being and seeing. So we're gonna share poems by Dickinson, and we've chosen some of her poems and paired them with poems from the anthology. So today in the role of Emily Dickinson, Jennifer Franklin.
It's on, right? Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us today for this panel. We're so appreciative to all of you in here and out there on Zoom, including the poets who are being read today from the Braving the Body anthology. Special shout out to all my students who told me they were Zooming in, and to my intern, Sarah, who came all the way from Smith to hear us today. And I just want to give a special commemoration to my father-in-law, whose birthday it is today, and he died in April. And so now he, like Emily Dickinson, knows what is there beyond life, if anything. So happy birthday. This is the first poem, and it's the poem that gave this panel its title, which is called, as you know, I'm Afraid to Own a Body. It's poem number 1090, and I think you'll see it on the slide on the screen too. Poem 1090. I am afraid to own a body. I am afraid to own a soul. Profound, precarious property. Possession, not optional. Double estate entailed at pleasure upon an unsuspecting heir. Duke in a moment of deathlessness, and God for a frontier. Many of Dickinson's poems present the dual lifelong difficulties of having a soul and having a body. She was ahead of her time in presenting the mind-body dichotomy and our current understanding of the concept that the body keeps the score. As Helen Vendler writes, Dickinson satirizes received religious thought while retaining its metaphysical dimension and its compensatory solace. She continues the European lyric description of how erotic adoration comes to grief, and she dwells a great deal on death's certainty and an uncertain immortality. Many of the poems, like this one, grapple with the fact that humans are not given a choice if they want to be born, as well as her preoccupation of questioning free will and lack thereof. Perhaps it is in Dickinson's fragments, now called the envelope poems, where her thesis of the body as the receptacle of life's pain is most keenly seen. And I have a little quote from this for you. A not admitting of the wound until it grew so wide that all my life had entered it, and there were troughs beside. So this is where her thesis of the body as the receptacle of life's pain is most keenly seen of everything that I've read of Dickinson's. Throughout her work, there is a constant negotiating and dialogue with God about what he has done to humans, giving them the confines of the body and the soul. And now I'm going to read 473, our first poem that we're pairing with one of our body poems. I was the slightest in the house. I took the smallest room. At night, my little lamp and book and one geranium. So stationed, I could catch the mint that never ceased to fall. And just my basket, let me think, I'm sure that this was all. I never spoke unless addressed, and then 'twas brief and low. I could not bear to live aloud, the racket shamed me so. And if it had not been so far, and anyone I knew were going, I had often thought how noteless I could die. A lot has been written about Dickinson's posture, about making herself small and inconspicuous, but this seems more like a statement about how she felt she was perceived as a woman in a male-dominated world. Scholars have posited that she thought she had to make her true or essential self small and private. Though her loved ones knew she wrote, she sent poems and letters. The speaker here says she never spoke unless addressed. This may be a reference to the discrepancy between her concerns and their more everyday concerns. They shut me up in prose, she writes. As always, there is an element of anxiety, of passing through this life without making a mark. The modesty and the self-deprecation in this poem are belied by the work she has done. When we told Jessica Coelho we had paired this Emily Dickinson poem with Beauty, she shared with us that she kept that poem with her in high school, and you can see how its spirit influenced her work.
This is Beauty by Jessica Coelho. I suspected beauty in myself. I broke the bathroom sink trying to reach the mirror, longed for photos, there were none. I was an observer of my own knees, stroked my own thighs, my arms, the same delicate slope as the shell split open to reveal the whorl, the tiny empty rooms shrinking into themselves. I was beautiful to dogs. They bit me. They wanted my flesh. One tore open my calf. A dog on a chain broke free to nip me. They could smell your fear, so stop fearing, the man said as his dog leapt on his leash. The man choked him back. The beauty in me could break a home by standing still, or scare a man by spitting milk into his lap. My cry could rupture love. I wandered through a mother's house to find a picture of my face. My face could crack and split your mouth, break the frame, and it is so plain to see. In the womb, I was an egg that should have spread its blood and thinned. Ugliness thrust its way to me, a banal fist and slap, and now my form must be erased. And beauty keeps attracting gropes. The Salvation Army clerk who thought I was a thief and lifted up my shirt where the bare ribs were and the skirt where she sought the necklace. I had not stolen. I froze for any caress, any glance, rough like my origin. Yes, even if it pinched, accused, my beauty was criminal. It begged. It said, break my skin to make it seen.
I'm struck by, and I think it might be in part from participating in the poetry marathon this morning, but the I of both these poems, like there's this I that goes so beyond subjectivity, and yeah, I mean, thinking of Jessica's poem, I was an observer of my own knees. Um, I'm I, I. Who is the I? What is the I? How does the I relate to the body?
Here's poem 670. One need not be a chamber to be haunted. One need not be a house. The brain has corridors surpassing material place. Far safer of a midnight meeting external ghost than an interior confronting that cooler host. Far safer through an abbey gallop, the stones a chase, than moonless one's a self encounter in lonesome place. Our self behind ourself concealed should startle most. Assassin hid in our apartment be horror's least. The prudent carries a revolver. He bolts the door, overlooking a superior specter more near. Dickinson often mentions the brain, as Nicole brought up earlier, preferring the bodily anatomical term than mind. Dickinson was expert at showing the way the body can feel haunted, constrained, fearsome, horrific. She skillfully uses the metaphor of a haunted house to show the way the mind and the body can often feel like a trap, and the way the contents of the mind and one's own body are often much more frightening than the horrors on the outside.
I was reading earlier this week this fascinating called Anatomy Lessons. I think it's Beverly Baumgartner, 2016. And it was talking about how Dickinson uses the brain and how at the time, I mean, it was very much informed by her studying anatomy class at Mount Holyoke, but also a capturing of like a separation of gender from, like at the time and even now, like women have heart, men have brains, allegedly. But so using the brain and using the clinical terms. This is Snakeskin by Ren Wilding. I have a particular slither in my chest, coiling me awake. My lungs will not open. I sit against the bathroom wall, tiles slicked with shower steam hissing through me a signal. As a child in the grocery store with my mother, people stare. How could such a rattle come out of that small throat? I'm trying to give myself a warning that my body will be haunted by what it sheds. Yeah, the haunting.
Dickinson poem. It's number 508. This is the one I memorized in a class that Alice Quinn taught at Columbia in my MFA program in 1995. It's 508. I'm seated. I've stopped being theirs. The name they dropped upon my face with water in the country church is finished using now. And they can put it with my dolls, my childhood, and my string of spools I've finished threading too. Baptized before without the choice, but this time consciously of grace unto supremest name. Called to my full, the crescent dropped, existence's whole arc filled up with one small diadem. My second rank, too small the first, crowned, crowing on my father's breast, a half unconscious queen, with will to choose, but this time adequate, erect, with will to choose or to reject. And I choose just a crown. This is Dickinson at her most empowered and most fierce, in my opinion. As in so many of her poems, this one traces the arc of the speaker being dominated by the family to being assertive and making her own choices, finding her own voice. Notice the embodied language in this poem. Dropped upon my face, crowned, crowing on my father's breast, half unconscious, erect. The speaker has discovered that she has the will to choose or to reject. She chooses a crown for her head, an image of an expensive ornament. I would argue, though, that this metaphor is for words that are being constantly created and formed in the speaker's mind. And like Dickinson, Diane Seuss's speaker goes in this poem that you're going to hear next from being a silent object of the male gaze to the one reframing and writing the narrative.
This is by Diane Seuss. My hair, oh, the color of a field mouse. Its texture, dust ball. My body, a world of massive disappointments. And I quote, I didn't realize your stomach would pooch over your two-piece, unquote. Said at the beach when I was 16 by my teacher, that was the year dead alewives washed up on shore in droves. If they were coins, I would have been rich, capable of liposuction, and Miss Michigan. In this passion play, the body is Judas, fat and misunderstood. In the mirror, its eyes are increasingly dead fish. How did Jesus keep his girlish figure? Poverty, walking barefoot, writing parables in his head, and getting flogged. His was a starvation diet. Bread, dates, olives, a turtle dove when he was lucky.
I'm thinking of the way that Seuss uses humor and the way that Dickinson uses humor, like having that expansive, it's not just serious. Poetry's not just serious, but the ways in which poets use humor to kind of sneak up on us, and then we realize, like, oh, I'm really feeling something because now I've just like laughed a little, you know.
Right. Like this poem is, sort of making Jesus into a person that's just like all of us, and kind of making us like question what does it mean to be a person with a body, and what does it mean to be God or to be worshipped. And I think that's really juxtaposition.
This is poem 26. It's all I have to bring today, this and my heart beside, this and my heart and all the fields and all the meadows wide. Be sure to count, should I forget, someone the sum could tell, this and my heart and all the bees which in the clover dwell. Dickinson's nature poems prove how close her speaker felt to the natural world, that she paired her heart with all the fields and the meadows. And she often uses nature in this and other poems to discuss the concerns of the body.
Yes, I want to thank also Zoe Ryder-White, one of the contributors of Braving the Body, who's here. We were noticing the little porch, the herbararium, and just thinking, as we've been walking around all day, just thinking how wild that Emily Dickinson just walked through this room. She does have such great light in her bedroom. I'm like, if I had that light, maybe I could write those poems. I mean, that's incredible light. And this poem that Jennifer just read, it should be noted, was read at Pichchenda's wedding. So, which I love. So this poem is Emily Hockaday. The heart grows full of weeds. Shepherd's purse, dandelion, sorrel. Too many root in the soft and vulnerable places for me to safely excise them. To tug on the stalks would dislodge the buried past, the lungs, my muscles and ligaments. We all want to survive, and sometimes that means propagating past the point of sense. The shepherd's purse shatters, and seeds take to the wind. My cardiologist says of my chest cavity, there are so many organs packed together in there. He's not worried about the skipped beats or the pounding. I tend to myself when no one else will. I tend to overthink. Honeybees aren't picky, says the local beekeeper. They thrive on clover and dandelions and violets, the ordinary plants that grow between sidewalks and cardiac tissue, the stalwart vegetation that fills the holes in your memory or your days or your lawn. One thing I wanted to say is it was when we were thinking, like, what poems from the book should we pair with Dickinson? There are so many. I mean, Dickinson's legacy is so deep within each of us. You never quite realize, I mean, or maybe you do, but it's just such it's pervasive. Like weeds, yes? Yeah, but
I was just thinking about with Emily Hockaday's poem, and Emily Dickinson's work, the way that like nature like weaves itself in to our bodies and our lives, and sometimes there's this like notion that nature exists somewhere else. Like you have to go out, I mean, I live in New York City, so, you're supposed to leave the city for nature. And what I love about Emily Hockaday's work in this poem, but also Emily Dickinson, is that like the nature and the things, life is there. It's right there with you, and you can find it's there. You can just see it. It's in your ligaments. It's on the sidewalk. It's coming up through, and that's what I really loved about the intersections of this poem.
Dickinson made a whole world from just what she saw here and reading books in her extensive library and looking out her windows and gardening. That the line from the Emily Hockaday poem when Nicole was reading it, that I tend to myself when no one else will, feels very Dickinsonian to me. And Diane Seuss was saying the other night in the phosphorescence reading that Michael was moderating, hi Michael, that as women, American women poets, what Nicole is saying, her influence is so pervasive. Sometimes we feel it overtly, sometimes it's a lot more subtle, sometimes it's happening when we don't even realize it's happening. And so it's been a real pleasure getting to think about these poems now through the lens of Dickinson's work and influence. This one you're all going to know at 372. After great pain, a formal feeling comes. The nerves sit ceremonious like tombs. The stiff heart questions, was it he that bore, and yesterday, or centuries before? The feet mechanical go round a wooden way of ground or air or aught. Regardless grown, a quartz contentment like a stone. This is the hour of lead, remembered if outlived, as freezing persons recollect the snow, first chill, then stupor, then the letting go. This is, I think, one of the most visceral, masterful descriptions of pain and its aftermath in the English language. Woolf famously wrote in her short piece on being ill that, quote, to hinder the description of illness in literature, there is the poverty of the language. English, which can express the thoughts of Hamlet and the tragedy of Lear, has no words for the shiver and the headache. It is all grown one way. The merest schoolgirl, when she falls in love, has Shakespeare or Keats to speak her mind for her. But let a sufferer try to describe a pain in his head to a doctor, and language at once runs dry. There is nothing ready-made for him. He is forced to coin words himself. And anyone who's ever been sick and had to deal a lot with doctors knows that this is true. Like so many of Dickinson's poems, this one shows the extreme state of despair being similar to that of death. So often the loss of life, the death of the body, is synonymous with the mind being tormented. Dickinson was ahead of her time in exploring and understanding this mind-body dichotomy. Just like the lines of the poem, it was not death, for I stood up and all the dead lie down. It was not night, for all the bells put out their tongues for noon. As the critic Charles R. Anderson writes, in a literal sense, there is neither persona nor ritual in this poem. Instead, as befits one who has lost all sense of identity, the various parts of the body are personified as autonomous entities, the nerves, the heart, the feet, and Wendler says, in this single poem, psychic and bodily pain are both immeasurably long and infinitely short. The next poem portrays illness in a similar way.
This is a poem by Janine Hall Gailey. Self-portrait as a body shaped by illness. My brain forms storm clouds. My veins run hot and cold. The idea of weather passes through my joints, fingers, spine, tingling with the rain. Fire burns in the passes, smoke in my hair. My nails glitter like lightning, my limbs are loosened, serpents that refuse to stay still. My lips too twisted to kiss. My throat a knotted root. My 2 feet untethered, unable to float, tipped to tangle. Take me in your arms. I will not remain the same. First one form, then another, a tree, a lake, a swan, a changeling that burns its image into the bed.
I took your notes because I was struck by that Wolf quote about the shiver. The shiver, the shiver and the headache, and thinking about that and the sense of coldness, the first chill, then stupor, then the letting go. And then with Janine's poem, too, there's the hot and the cold. So that wolf's shiver just sent me a shiver. Yeah.
You're also going to recognize this one. We could not include it. 280. I felt a funeral in my brain, and mourners to and fro kept treading till it seemed that sense was breaking through. And when they all were seated, a service like a drum kept beating till I thought my mind was going numb. And then I heard them lift a box and creak across my soul with those same boots of lead again. Then space began to toll, and all the heavens were a bell, and being but an ear, and I and silence, some strange race wrecked, solitary here. And then a plank in reason broke, and I dropped down and hit a world at every plunge, and finished knowing then. I first was introduced to this poem on the green at Brown University by my mentor, Arnold Weinstein. And my books in grade school had names from Emily Dickinson poems like Tell Me How the Sun Rose and things like that. And so those were the poems I knew of Dickinson to begin with, the ones that we teach children. And then I read these intense poems in my first semester at Brown, and I couldn't believe how contemporary and modern the feelings were and the language that she was using. Helen Vendler makes a lot of Dickinson, adding another stanza after she thinks the poem could have ended. Instead of ending with Dickinson's mind in stasis and stability in the tomb, she adds the final stanza where consciousness is wholly abolished. These famous after-death poems where she's speaking. Karen Friedland, in her moving poem, grapples with the abstraction of the speaker's own impending death from stage 4 cancer and how we can never know about our own death, no matter how certain or how imminent it is.
Yes, so during our publication process, one of our contributors moved to the other side before the book came out, and shortly, or not the other side, I think there are multiple sides, I don't know, but she left this plane, and we had the opportunity, it was the day before spring, and I remember so well because I said she was very prepared. She was beautifully prepared to transition. And I remember her saying, I really have just, my big goal has been to make it to the first day of spring. And you know how spring always sneaks up on you. And then you're like, the next day I was like, oh, today is the first day of spring. And she did make it to the first day of spring. And then to the eclipse, I remember being like, oh, Karen is still with us, and there's been the eclipse. But it was such an honor to meet with her on Zoom when she read this poem for us. We'll let her read it to you now.
Very proud to be part of the Braving the Body anthology, which is a magnificent collection, by the way, edited by Nicole, Callihan, Pichchenda, and Jennifer Franklin. My name's Karen Friedland. I'm going to read my poem in the anthology. I apologize if my voice is a little weak today, but it is what it is. So I'm going to do my best to put some strength into it. And the poem is called It Recurred. And again, my name is Karen Friedland. It recurred. Yes, this cancer is doing its damnedest to kill me, and it will eventually. This is guaranteed. But right now, my scrappy, hardy body prevails, spills words onto pages, accepts hugs from neighbors, makes savory dinners, appreciates fall crickets. I am living a somehow sweeter life on the precipice, with a gut full of growing tumors, on the knife edge of hope and terror. At this tender moment, my death is merely theoretical, and life is all I'll ever know. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole, for having the idea to film her reading her own poem and then using it today for this presentation. I think Nicole and I both feel very emotional when we read Karen's work because of our struggles with cancer, and this book really came out of that. So it means a lot to us that she sent us this poem to publish. So the next poem, we're going to move into one of Emily Dickinson's Civil War. Oh,
We're going backwards.
Civil War poems. It's number 444. It feels a shame to be alive when men so brave are dead. One envies the distinguished dust permitted such a head, the stone that tells defending whom this Spartan put away. What little of him we possessed in pawn for liberty. The price is great, sublimely paid. Do we deserve a thing that lives like dollars must be piled before we may obtain? Are we that weight sufficient worth that such enormous pearl as life dissolved be for us in battle's horrid bowl? It may be a renown to live. I think the man who die, those unsustained saviors, present divinity. Dickinson wrote this poem in 1863 during the deadliest year of the Civil War. The Battle of Gettysburg was that summer where 51,000 people were killed. The concerns of this poem are so contemporary. They deal with concerns that we have had in our lifetimes, the AIDS crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, the conflicts that are raging right now in Ukraine, Gaza, Lebanon, Darfur. On October 16th, the Dickinson Museum will host a presentation about Emily Dickinson's war poems and the relevance to her poems to the social movements of today. So check that out. While Dickinson's poem recognizes the serious impact on the psyche of what we now call survivor's guilt, the next poem by Ian Haley Pollock considers the deep cost of every single life that is lost and the severe injustice of lives ended by racist violence, not just to the murdered person, but to everyone in that person's orbit, the endless ramifications of those deaths.
This is by Ian Haley Pollock. All the possible bodies. My alcoholic grandfather couldn't hold his money and passed a bad check. Hampton, Virginia, after Brown v. Wade, but before Selma's Bloody Sunday. After my grandmother died, but before he moved the family north, back to the town of his birth. My mother saw her father cuffed and dragged from the house. The next day, by some miracle she never understood, he came home. Had he looked at the officers wrong, acted wrong, spoken wrong, been too familiar, been a few inches taller, been deeper voiced or darker skinned, and for this, had he caught a knee that night to the neck and not returned, perhaps my mother, needing to stay home and raise Aunt Joan and Uncle Keith, would have skipped college. Had she skipped college, perhaps she would not have gone for a PhD. Had she not gone for a PhD, perhaps she would not have met my father. Had she not met my father, perhaps I would not be here. Perhaps the boys sleeping upstairs from me now would not be here. When you spend 8 minutes and 46 seconds with your knee on another man's neck, you block not just the passage of air into his body, but block the air in all the possible bodies dependent on that man and his neck to breathe, 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 breathe.
Wow, Chenda, you read that poem so beautifully. That may be my favorite poem in the anthology. For a change of pace,
Well, I just wanted to say
Yeah.
it is such a striking poem, and the first lines of the Dickinson poem were, "It feels a shame to be alive," and I find it so powerful that, and I know these are Dickinson's war poems, but so powerful that this poem does, I mean, these two poems speak to each other so beautifully, and they, really deepen the understanding of each of the poems. So it's, yeah, it feels a shame to be alive, but we don't want it to feel shameful to be alive. So one thing that was really important to us as we put together this book was to find all different kinds of experiences in the body. It was important for us to honor joy and falling in love and being grateful for the body. So there's so much. It's very expansive, and the experiences are expansive. And as we were saying earlier, with humor, but also with tenderness, with joy, with moments of light. So we will turn now to this dirty little heart.
These next poems are joyful poems. This is 1311. This dirty little heart is freely mine. I won it with a bun, a freckled shrine, but eligibly fair to him who sees the visage of the soul and not the knees. This is a modern, sensual, cheeky, brave poem in Dickinson's assertive mode. The speaker is laying claim to her dirty little heart. It is freely hers. The face of the soul and the knees are striking images to juxtapose in this short, thought-provoking, sensual poem. Ellen Bass expands on this sensuality and gives us even more to sink our teeth into.
Yeah, we had a running Google Doc, and I think I put one of those like googly heart eye faces beside this dirty little heart. So this is Ellen Bass, Ode to Fat. Tonight, as you undress, I watch your wondrous flesh that swelled again, the way a river swells when the ice relents. Sweet relief just to regard the sheaves of your hips, your boundless breasts and marshy belly. I adore the acreage of your thighs and praise the promising planets of your ass. Oh, you were lean that terrifying year you were unraveling, as though you were returning to the slender scrap of a girl I fell in love with. But your skin was vacant, a ripped sack, sugar spilling out and your bones insistent. Oh, praise the loyalty of the body that labors to rebuild its palatial realm. Bless butter, bless brie, sanctify schmaltz and cream and cashews, stoke the furnace of the stomach and load the vessels. Darling, drench yourself in opulent oil, the lamp of your body glowing. May you always flourish, enormous and sumptuous, be marbled with fat, a great vault that I can enter, the cathedral where I pray. Waka waka. So, yeah. So, knees, thighs, we've got it all. Yeah.
I think also what is so like wonderful about Ellen Bass's work and in this poem was the way that she uses the language of the cosmos, planetary. You know, she connects the body to celestial bodies, and I was thinking about how Emily does that as well in her work. The way that she sort of takes these lofty ideas, eternity, immortality, and she makes it belongs to her. And I think that was really cool.
I also, when we were editing this, I think bless butter, bless brie went in my head like a million times. Bless butter, bless brie. Yeah. So we do have a writing prompt. Would you like to write a bit? Yeah? Okay. Because we could also, if you wanted to ask a few questions first, and then we could go to writing, or we can just go straight into writing. I like the straight into writing nods. Okay. I really appreciate those.
Yeah, so our prompt that Nicole has for us is based on two poems, a Dickinson poem and a Lisa Olstein poem. Do you want to read?
Can I read the Dickinson?
Yeah.
Okay. I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. The eyes around had wrung them dry, and breaths were gathering firm. for that last onset, when the king be witnessed in the room, I willed my keepsakes, signed away what portion of me be assignable, and then it was, there interposed a fly, with blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between the light and me, and then the windows failed, and then I could not see to see. So I was struck by how much it feels like Lisa Olstein could have written the poem that we're going to read to you from this prompt. So, Chenda, are you going to read it? Do you want to?
The Spell by Lisa Olstein. The lover who punished me, the sea wasp that stung me, the mold that bloomed behind the walls that housed me, the evil eye cast by a rival to expel me. The love gold as any honey hived around me, the pills I took, the pills I didn't take, the doctors, the needles, the vials, the scripts, the whirring, the silence, the sputtering engines of my cells, the years, the spell I want to cast across them.
The spell I want to cast across them. So the lover who punished me, the sea wasp that stung me, I heard a fly buzz when I died. So for this, I want you to start with two juxtaposing images. So one thing that is quite ordinary, a fly buzzing, with something that's quite extraordinary. Okay? So working with juxtaposition, you can play with dashes, and we are going to write for 11 minutes. Okay? I'm just getting something started on the page, putting it down. We do have some paper up here with copies of all the poems we've read. So you can, if you need paper, we can share that with you. But I'm going to start the timer for 11 minutes, and you go for it. Okay? And for those on Zoom, if you want to share your poem in the question answer, you may do that, and we might have time to read one of those. I mean, it's probably not a full poem, but the beginnings of a poem. About a minute left. And the time has come. The time has come. How'd that feel? Pretty good, pretty good. One thing I wanted to mention before we hopefully hear a few of these is that this anthology was so much more than a product, though you are welcome to buy the product for $20. But we always saw it as a process. Actually, during that writing, I was thinking about last summer we offered a series of generative writing workshops online. We also had a workshop at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So Braving the Body is a much bigger community than just the anthology. We had 800 poets submit to the anthology, and 3 poems each, and there are so many poems that we couldn't include within the book product, but that are very much part of our community and that we value and feel grateful for. So, yes. And we might even send, we have more programming probably coming up if we think about it. So we may send around a sheet of paper if you want to be on our Braving the Body list. We would love to include you. And Zoom folks can put their emails in if you'd like to be, because it's been beautiful. Yeah. So, speaking of beauty, who is brave? Which brave soul would like to share their 11-minute draft? Yes,
I'm coming with the mic.
we have a mic coming.
Is it on? Okay. The seed. I had to check if it was real, a real one. If it had emerged from inside me, I wasn't sure until I verified by asking. And to crown the achievement, I was handed a hamburger by my midwife with whom I had recently been dancing, naked and large. It was a cheeseburger, charred from the charcoal grill off the patio, and someone had decided to place it on a pillow of brioche. When we finally thought to ask about sex, I was reclined on a 4-poster bed with west-facing windows ahead of me and a person now drinking from my breast, nursing in time with the roots. I would name her rock and roll. But her balls were too big, swollen disproportionately under skinny little legs and an empty belly, surging for more, surging for all that I could release into this world.
You look like you are half raising your hand. Are you not? Okay. Oh, you are.
Heat inside the rented room swelled, westerly sun, until an eclipse partial. The heat died down. I tried to turn away, not to look, 4 times, including now. Ah, my poor eyes have witnessed an eclipse, kept blinds closed, lying on bed weeping. Afraid I'll lose my vision if 4 eclipses seen. No sunglasses this time. I felt the heat wane, slightly darker. Circadian rhythm change, tempted still to view the eclipse, partial. I held my phone to the curtain. I held my phone to the window. Pictures and short video made, documenting the change in beat. Shadows quake and shiver in the encroaching eclipse, partial. Even so, satisfied with documentation, tempted at the recording, eclipse still going. Tearing, sobbing, asking for forgiveness, I viewed the sky.
The drying, dying azalea plant stood in for your heart, homesick for your former home that was so different from your origins. The place where your brother shot rats with his BB gun as they rustled under the coop, where you wore a cowgirl skirt and boots, holsters without guns, for your hands were girls. That darkness you wanted to leave behind and leave and leave and left, or thought you did, driving all the way to the other coast where you had never been. What courage it must have taken to take that long foreign route and go where none of yours had gone before, opening yourself to avocado, apricot trees, green corn tamales, Muscle Beach. My father bought a convertible and drove around with top down like a movie star. You were blinded by the palmy light after your years of New England dark. But then you were ripped from paradise, transplanted just when roots had begun, and brought to this bland desert, so humid it made the dog sick, and its hair fell out in patches, leaving raw pink skin behind.
Can I share 2 from the chat? Okay, these are 2 short ones. So one from Sadie B. A mosquito whines by my good ear. My deaf one pressed into the pillow shrinks. Death in her hood waits by my bed. She's brought the scythe for good effect, for fright. Companionable, silent, except for the whine, the slap. Too late, the bite. This one is by Kate Beale, and if I can just get my chat. Okay, Kate. Another insect poem. 3 spider bites in the garden. Elsewhere, a bomb goes off. The silence after, the passive voice, the tender inner arm, just an arm, bodiless, brain lit up, brain on fire, charred trunk, rubble, slag, smoke, sky.
My alarm sounds 3 times. I drink my morning toxin. The will is weak, the flesh is strong. My fragile bones are knocked in. I try not to ingest the poison in my vision. Stomach weak, heart sickened, ill-suited to the ill derision. How have they called the other shore as I resolve no more, no more?
The building blocks of time. These little grains of sand that sit upon the mat, they divulge the soothing currents of the sea. They call forth the dustpan and the brush, but who would sweep away the ancient glass forged by nature's terrifying power that thrashed the ships of Ahab and Achilles? Next time when the child arrives, wandering home from the beachy surf, embrace the essential building blocks of time, brought back between her toes and settled upon the mat.
Thank you all, and for sharing those with us and sharing this space with us. It's a real honor. We do have a little time left for comments or questions.
We can sign books if you would like us to.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to repeat that because I didn't get too fast enough. What was your process for? I'm just going to come to you. There we go.
What was your process for putting the book together and gathering submissions? I think it was pretty straightforward. We had a call for submissions. It was open for like a month, and they came in. We just shared it with as many people as we knew. We posted it on Facebook. We were also partnered with Poetry Well. It's a mental health and poetry organization in New York, and we had just like multiple. We really were trying to reach as many different communities and people as we could, and kept it open for as long as we could handle. I mean, we did get 800 submissions in that month, which was really amazing. And then we read them all, and then we talked about them.
Yeah, it was so nice to read each person's 3 submissions. And at first, we didn't know if we were going to divide them up and just read a certain number, but we figured it was so important for all of us to know all of the poems to be able to pick what we wanted. And as Nicole was saying, we had, before the opening of the submissions, we had these readings and we had these writing workshops, generative workshops. So we were advertising the call for submissions during that time.
Yeah, and so mostly, anyone who got 3 yeses, so we voted, it was via submittable, and anyone who got 3 yeses automatically got in. And then there were a few that people fought for and felt passionate about, which was, those conversations were great. So yeah, it was amazing to work as a team, and for each of us to read everything and be responsible together. Thank you. Yes.
This is kind of a follow-up question. I'm always interested in how people put together collections, and especially when you have all these different writers. Can you talk a little bit about your process of deciding which poem was going to go where?
A, B, C, D, E. We ended up going alphabetically because we had thought, for a while we were like, okay, well, we can do, birthing poems in this section, and we can do, illness here. But there are so many intersections, and being in a body is so complicated, and it's impossible to try to group it under one umbrella. So, and it actually feels really good alphabetically. We had a great review in Rhino that, it talks about the organization structure and how each of the poems is like leading into the next. So I think that's divine intervention. That's how we organize. Divine intervention.
I'm going to ask a question from the from the Q&A on Zoom. Emily Dickinson famously said, "If I read a book and it makes my whole body so cold no fire can warm me, I know that is poetry." And so we're wondering if, where in the body do you each feel poetry, and what is the sensation of poetry for you?
I probably think I feel poetry in my lungs. I think it's in the breath for me.
I like that answer. I think I used to tell students when I worked with children more that you have to think about like a sort of cord that runs from your heart to your brain, and you're like pluck, pluck, pluck. So there's this cord. I think that's where I feel it.
For me, it's if I get hairs on the back of my neck or goosebumps on my arm.
Can we expect a second edition of Braving the Body?
Good question. Certainly certainly a lot of body poems, and we've seen a lot of them since then. So maybe.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going to happen. We'll see. Time will tell. But it might, who knows? I am grateful to, I should say, to Harbor Editions for publishing this book and this. Yes.
I do think that the community and the ties the connections that people have made through the book and with us, I hope will endure.
Yeah, it's been meaningful to get to know the contributors, because most of the people who contributed, none of us knew before the book came out. And during the process of editing, we got a chance to meet them. We got a chance to meet them at readings. Some of them are here today with us to support the anthology. We've had a lot of events, both in person and online. We may be going to AWP in
Yes.
LA.
We're having a birthday party.
Yeah, 1 year.
In AWP, it'll be the 1 year, and we're going to have cake at an Italian restaurant.
Yeah.
And be in LA. Oh, and we may have a reading at the Bachelor Mansion. So if you have any contacts, this is my dream, and everyone will get a rose.
Well, I think we will leave it there and say a huge thank you to these poets. Can we